everybody. Recording live from somewhere. This is Zach Couples with episode number 93 of the Movement Debrief. And tonight, folks, this one goes out to you and yours. We're going to talk about tibial rotation. What is the deal with tibial rotation? What types of foot positions can you use to drive the tibia one direction versus the other? And when should you do it? I will give you the answer. We're going to talk about knee pain during resets. What happens if you're doing something like a 90-90 or hook lying or something wild and crazy and your knee bugs you when it shouldn't? It's supposed to help you. Stay tuned. And last but not least, we'll talk about the deep neck flexors and the tongue. Are these useful things to worry about when we are doing some of our wild and crazy resets and breathing techniques? These will all be answered tonight because these are questions that have been asked by the people. They'll be answered for the people by this people right here, fam recognized fam. Without further ado, let's debrief, shall we? The first question comes from Amanda. And here's what Amanda asks. Could you debrief on specific movements such as pronation, supination, calcaneal, inversion, and eversion that help derotate tibias when they are postured externally rotated or internally rotated? I have a grasp on pelvis, femurs, ribs, diaphragm, but when it comes to tibial varus with ER or tibial valgus with IR, I have a difficult time identifying which way the tibia is rotated, and then specifically what foot and maybe hip movements can derotate that to a neutral position. I know good shoes and inserts can make a difference, but I need to learn what I can use exercise-wise to impact this. Amanda, good question. Let's talk about tibial rotation. So you have two types of rotational actions at the tibia. You have external rotation, which is where you got this bony landmark right here, or if you're listening to this on audio, if you go find your kneecap and you drop right below that, that's the tibial tuberosity. If that bony landmark turns outward, away from the body, that would be external rotation. As external rotation of the tibia happens, the foot tends to supinate, and the calcaneus would then invert or tip inward. Okay. Also, this motion occurs predominantly with knee extension. That's the screw home mechanism. So if I extend my knee, I'm going to have some degree of tibial external rotation, which subsequently leads to the femur being relatively internally rotated. All right, let me go through that one last time. If I externally rotate the tibia, that's associated with also knee extension, femur or femoral internal rotation, and then your foot would supinate, the calcaneus would invert. If you got that part, then the tibial internal rotation is going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy. If I internally rotate the tibia, your tibial tuberosity, that bony landmark, is going to point inward towards the body. That's associated with knee flexion. At the foot is going to be more pronated. Calcaneus is going to be more everted. It's going to be tipped outward. At the femur, I'm going to have more external rotation, which is what creates that normal knee flexion. Those are the associated movements that occur with tibial rotation, external and internal. Now, how would you assess to see if you have relative tibial external or internal rotation? You could, in theory, flex the knee and check tibial rotation that way. I don't do that so often. What I do more of when I'm looking at which direction the tibia is rotated is I will look at foot orientation, predominantly the calcaneus, because that's going to tell me which way the tibia is directed, and then I'll check either rotation up top in the hips, or I'll just look at knee position, and visually you can kind of tell if someone has a tibial rotation one way or another. For example, if you see someone, and this is commonly what I see in many people, and there's not necessarily like a rhyme or reason where, but a lot of times what you'll see is you'll see the foot flared outward, so it'll be kind of the duck foot position, and the tibia will be externally rotated because you'll see an arch in the foot, and then you'll see the knee cave inward into IR. That's a pretty common rotational pattern. So my assessment and treatment would look kind of like this. So first and foremost, if you've taken care of you want to make sure you've taken care of everything upstairs. So hip extension, all the stuff in the ventral cavity. And if you don't know what that is or what to do about it, man, just go to zachcouples.com and make your way through the FAQ. I don't really have anything specific that I could share in the show notes, which will be on zachcouples.com tomorrow. But let's say you have all that. Make sure you have your femoral rotation component restored. Then, and only then, after you've done all that stuff, if there's still some issues, wherever the person's having an issue, pain, discomfort, whatever, then it would behoove you to probably work on tibial rotation. So if I have a scenario where the foot is supinated, calcaneus is inverted, and the tibia is externally rotated, I would simply pronate the foot, make sure that that individual can feel the arch, and while simultaneously, which would IR the tibia, while simultaneously making sure the knee is corrected to center. Because many times what will happen is you'll have someone pronate the foot, and I'm driving my knee inward, and so it'll look like there's a valgus collapse. You want to keep that pronation and then attempt to bring the knee back to center. So what that does then is the pronation drives the IR, but if the knee follows suit, then the whole leg is internally rotated. So I want to pronate to get the tibial IR, and then I'm going to bring the knee back to center, which is femoral external rotation, to drive more tibial ER. By creating that contrast, then we can drive more of the tibial internal rotation. On the flip side, well, activities I like for both of these, by the way, are lunges or split squat variations. That's commonly what I would use if I needed to work on tibial rotation. You can also do some stuff with squatting as well, but lunges, I think it's easier visually for the clients to see the knee go in and out. For the reverse of that, if I need to drive tibial external rotation, and the foot's pronated, what I'm going to have that person do is feel the outside of their heel, which is going to do exact opposite of what I just showed. So if I'm going more outside heel, then you're going to see the knee bow outward in like a bow-legged position. You want them to keep that outside heel and bring the knee to center. What that's going to do is if I supinate the foot or I get more calcaneal inversion, that's going to drive the whole extremity into external rotation. That includes the tibia, so the tibia is going to be ER'd. By bringing the knee back to center, that's going to IR the tibia. If I IR the tibia, then I'm going to have greater external rotation, or I'm sorry, if I'm going to IR the femur, then I'm going to have greater external rotation at the tibia. And that's really the long and the short of how I would go about derotating tibias. And it's purely, more often than not, based on symptoms in terms of when I would do that. So to summarize your great question, Amanda, tibial rotation, external is when the tibial tuberosity points outward. Internal is when the tibial tuberosity points inward. For external, that's associated with supination and calcaneal inversion. For internal rotation, that's associated with pronation and calcaneal eversion. What you want to do to derotate is, if I have someone who's got an externally rotated tibia, which you would assess that by looking at hip rotation, but also I usually use visual inspection. If you see the foot is more supinated, you can make the assumption that the tibia is probably externally rotated. And also looking at the knee, if you see the knee kind of valgused inward, then you probably have a scenario where the tibia is externally rotated and the femur is internally rotated. For those people, you want to reverse that. That would involve pronating the foot to IR the tibia and then driving the knee back to center to create external rotation. That creates that derotation that you're looking for. So if they're in one direction, you put them in the exact opposite direction. And that's really the crux of just about everything that we're doing here with restoring movement options, is you give them what they don't have. On the other side, if I have someone who's got an I-yard tibia and the femur's E-yard, I'm going to drive, or in that case, the foot will be more pronated, so I'm going to drive weight on the outside of the heel, which would create more calcaneal inversion and relatively supinate the foot from that pronated position. That's going to externally rotate the tibia. Bringing the knee back to center is going to create IR, which is going to create that rotational bias even further. Activities that are good, split squats, lunge variations. You can do it with squatting too, but I find that really split squats and lunge are the best. And by the time you're addressing tibial rotation, they're probably going to be doing well enough to be able to do split squats and lunges without much issue. And that's how I would go about derotating tibias. That's the story. I'm sticking to it. Amanda, until I get better evidence. But Amanda, great question. The next question comes from Lady Rebecca. And here's what Lady Rebecca asks. What's going on when clients have knee pain with the 90-90 hip lift? It's usually like a 50, 60 female-year-old women who have multiple movement limitations, no previous history of trauma to the knee. So what's going on with pain in the 90-90 hip lift? Great question, Lady Rebecca. If you don't know what the 90-90 hip lift is, I will link. I did a huge deep dive on it a while back. I'll link that deep dive in the show notes. It's still pretty good. In fact, it's the most popular post on my website, so you probably should check it out. 90-90 hip lift, though, would be where you would have the hips and knees bent at 90 degrees. And from, well, wow, that's a struggle. And from that position, you would tilt your hips or do a posterior tilt to lift the hips up. That's where you're getting the hip lift. And the reason why we do that is to drive hip extension as well as restore movement options in the lower and upper thorax. Most people have limitations in hip extension. So it's a great base move to teach someone who has a limitation there. Muscles that are going to help with hip extension will be your hamstrings and your glute max. I mention that because it's going to be important in terms of why someone might be getting knee pain. Now, if someone gets any knee discomfort anywhere, what's probably going on, there's two possible things that I see with this. One could be that they're not truly getting the tuck. So instead of, because ideally as you do this, if the pelvis is this, you should see the pelvis kind of curl underneath. And if my hand was the lower back should flatten on the mat as the pelvis lifts up. So there should be no tension in the lower back. You also shouldn't see the abdominal wall bulge out as you do this. A lot of times with people who get knee discomfort on a 90-90 hip lift or any of these resets on your back is because they're missing that tuck component. They're either trying to tuck with their abs, they're arching their back, or they're bracing everything down, and that's where you get the splosh out. So for those people, you may want to cue them to have relaxed abs. Cues that I really like to coach the tuck right now is belt buckle to belly button or back pockets to the knees in the case of the 90-90 hip lift. Get the tuck down pat. Many times that will take away the knee discomfort. If they're still having knee issues, what's probably going on is, especially if you're using like a chair or a flexion stool to perform the 90-90 hip lift or various activities, is what they're probably doing is really digging the heels down. And so when they're doing that, they're using more distal component of the hamstrings to pull the pelvis upward, which if the distal component of the hamstrings is a weak hip extensor because it's so far away from the hip. So they may not be able to develop or generate tension effectively in the proximal hamstrings or glute max to be able to create the lift. So for those people, you may want to remove the the chair or the wall, or even discourage digging the heels down if you're not using that on the wall. A lot of times what I do with people who get knee discomfort is I'll either tell them to minimally dig the heels down, or what I'll do is I'll tell them I don't want them to move their foot much. Their foot's just glued to the wall. I want you to roll your hips up without using your foot to do so. That's reinforcing using hamstrings or proximal hamstrings and glute max to create the tilt. And more often than not, that ought to take care of the issues. Other possible things you could have going on is you want to make sure that I would put something between the knees, depending on if they're a narrow or a wide infrasternal angle. If you don't know what that is, I'll link it in the show notes. But if they're narrow, sometimes creating the hip adduction along with that can help with knee discomfort. Or if they're wide, not doing that component can also help with knee discomfort. And those are really the three situations that I would problem solve through if someone had discomfort on the 90-90 hip lift. If they're still having issues, despite your best coaching efforts and running through those problem-solving things, I would pick something easier. This could be having them do like a rock back or something where they have way more hip flexion, or even you could try flexing the hips more to see if they can get a tilt that way. Those moves may make it easier because it may just be in that hip position. They may not be able to generate effective tension to lift the hips up, and that's why they're getting knee discomfort. So to summarize your wonderful question, Lady Rebecca, people are getting knee discomfort probably because they can't get the tuck effectively to occur. So what you want to do is make sure the abs stay relaxed, that they're curling the pelvis up, and minimizing heel dig. Because if you're using a lot of heel dig, you're probably going to be using distal hamstring more, which could put more stress on the knee. Once you've done that and you've gotten rid of those things, you also make sure that the knees are centered. Squeezing a ball if you're narrow, not squeezing if you're wide. If you're still having issues, I would select an easier activity, which would be something with greater hip flexion. I like rock backs, which I'll link in the show notes. That's actually a really good starting point. You can also do side lying tilting, side lying 90-90. I like that variation a lot as well because you eliminate gravity and it's a lot easier to tuck. So I will make sure that all that stuff is linked in the show notes for you, Lady Rebecca. Amazing question. If you're wondering, well, man, Zach, that video was great that you did, but I'm not sure how to coach it. Or, you're thinking like, okay, well, yeah, the 90-90 hip lift is a good exercise, but I don't really know when to program it. Or, well, I'm a trainer and I don't need to do that stuff. I just need to get my people hella strong. Well, I'm going to answer all those questions for you because I think in all those cases, there's one thing that can help you, and that one thing is human matrix. Because what we do in that seminar is we build you a continuum. We teach you how to, it's very tight. It's very tight, Miles. Yeah, it's small, but it works. But in human matrix, we teach you how to establish a movement foundation and take some of the fundamental concepts that I'm talking about in a debrief such as this and apply them in the performance realm. So it's not like we're, on our bags doing all these silly breathing things. We are getting up, moving some heavy-ass weights, but doing so with technique that is going to increase muscle activity more than you've ever felt before. If you want to go to one of these bad boys. This weekend, August 24th and 25th, we will be in Vancouver, British Columbia. There are still a few tickets available. You probably want to give that one a shot. I'd love to see you there if you live in Canada. Or if you don't, maybe you're up in the Pacific Northwest and you want to hang with Big Z. I'm cool with that too. October 5th and 6th, Boston, Massachusetts. November 23rd and 24th in New York City. December 7th and 8th in Orlando, Florida. And last but not least, January 25th and 26th in Scotts Valley, California. Yes, we are into 2020 already, people. And that's what I got. Also, minor housekeeping thing. If you want to master the fundamentals or you want to learn a little bit more about money or what else? What other good stuff we got going on? Or if you want to know how synovial fluid works, I would go to zachcouples.com because I just released a blog on Monday that talks about the links, a bunch of wild and crazy cool things that we learned last month. If you are a newsletter subscriber, fam recognized fam, definitely go check that out on zachcouples.com. The last question comes from, who's it come from? Andy. Here's what Andy asks me. In 90-90 hip lift activities, common themes today, is there a place for deep neck flexor activity and or myofunctional therapy, tongue, posture? Great question. So let me break this down one piece at a time. In terms of deep neck flexors, I really don't worry about them as much as I used to. Not that I really worried about them ever. Because we hone in the rehab realm. We really hone in on these super duper deep muscles, and we think in many cases that this is the panacea for neck pain, TMJ, or TMD, among other things. And after having spent time, more time learning from Daddy-O Pops Bill Hartman at his intensive, which, I mean, if you can make it to one of those, you definitely should. But there's many other muscles that are superficial to that we often ignore. When we're doing cadaver dissections, we cut through all of that stuff. And a lot of these muscles are involved in swallowing, among other things, but they also probably play a role in neck orientation and position. And I think it's something that we really ignore. So I focus a lot on that, which is why I'm glad that Andy asked about the tongue, because I've been doing a lot more tongue stuff lately with the help of my esteemed colleague Joe Cicinelli, who I will also link in the show notes because he's really good people, really smart guy. He's really made me think a lot differently about the neck and moving up. Do we worry about it in our simple resets? The answer is yes, but where I would put something like head position, which is why I don't care about deep neck flexors, I care about head orientation and tongue. Yes, but only after they've mastered some of the other components of the sequencing that we're doing. For example, if they suck at tucking, you probably don't need to worry about deep neck flexors and tongue posture. If they can't achieve a full exhale, probably don't need to worry about it. If they can't pause and keep ab tension during an inhale, probably not something to worry about. And in fact, those would be the boxes I would check before I would even go down this path. So, can they tuck? Can they achieve a full exhalation? Can they pause and keep the ab tension that they acquired from the exhalation during the inhale? Those are 4 components that your people need to be able to do, and in that order, before even think about anything with the tongue, the neck, or even with arms, in my opinion. Because most people screw up by skipping those steps. And they try to go to something fancy, or they try to do 10 million things at once. No, slow down your pace. If there's anything that I've done in the last couple of years that's made me a better clinician, it's slow motion, baby. It's taking the time to make sure those pieces are in place before I go to something wild and crazy. Because I often found that if I skip steps or I tried to go with a really advanced technique and it didn't work, it's probably because I had missed those components on the front end. Let me save you time. Get those components first. Now let's say you have that and life's all hunky-dory. I like neck posture. I like putting the tongue on the roof of the mouth during exercises, and that's about as far as I go. So, in regards to the tongue, keep the tongue on the roof of the mouth during the inhale. Why? Because then that seals off the oral airway, allows you to get air through your nose more effectively. That's about as far as I go with the tongue on exercises. If someone has an issue and they need to do some tongue-based stuff, I use that as a separate activity, and I try to coach that up in a different manner instead of trying to integrate it into maybe a reset activity. In terms of neck position, more often than not, I will cue the chin slightly away from the neck, i.e. OA extension. So as you're doing that, it's just the head moving. You don't want to tip the neck all the way back. You don't want to pull the chin in. You don't want to do anything like that. The reason why the OA extension component is useful is because it opens up the airway, which allows you to get more air in and out. Many times if you see someone when they inhale and they do the sniffing dog, which is they take a breath of air in and it's like, they probably closed off the upper airway. So a lot of times just doing the OA extension component can be useful. If you have someone who is more a military posture, a lot of times putting a pillow on the occiput to push the head slightly forward can be very useful. On the flip side, if you have someone who's got a forward head and they're young, right, they can get it back into that position. A lot of times I will not use a pillow. Or a lot of times I won't use a pillow, and that can be very useful as well. And that's really about as far as I go with some of the base activities in terms of neck and tongue posture. And of course, if someone's doing an activity and they're looking way down, a lot of times just correcting the head so they're facing forward can be very useful. So to summarize your question, Andy, are tongue and neck important? Yes, they are. Only after you've mastered the basics. So make sure they can tuck, exhale, keep ab tension during the inhale and pause. If you've done that during activities, I think tongue on the roof of the mouth is probably all you need. If you give slight OA extension, that can open up the upper airway, make life hunky-dory. If you get someone who's military, put a pillow under the head to shove the head a bit more forward. If someone's more forward head posture, just let them relax on the ground, and you ought to be in business. And I think that's a good stopping point for us tonight. I want to thank all of you beautiful, sexy, outstanding people for tuning in. If you want to learn more, go to zachcouples.com. There you can subscribe to my newsletter, which I alluded to previously. You'll get links every Friday. You're going to get about 5 hours worth of talks. You'll get a free acute to chronic workload calculator, all types of good stuff. Definitely sign up for that. Also, you might get some exclusive discounts on products because you're the fan. Once you've done that, I offer 3 services on my page. Don't leave zachcouples.com yet. Maybe you have some movement limitations, or you're a trainer and you're like, I'm just getting into this stuff and I don't know where to start, or I have a troubled client and I've been doing this stuff and I don't know what to do, or maybe not a trainer, but even a clinician, and you need some outside eyes to help your movement goals or your client's movement goals. That's where a movement consultation comes into play. We'll do it virtual reality. I'll come in, we'll do a Skype call or a Zoom call, and I will perform an evaluation on you, and we will figure out what movements you can't do, get you to do some movements, and we'll get you back in business. Or maybe you just want to talk shop and learn how to do that without me helping you, which I totally get. Maybe you like this stuff, but you're uncertain how it applies to your clientele. That's where the mentoring program comes in. What we'll do is we'll hop on some calls, we'll give some back and forth discussion, we will figure out how to best implement this stuff into the things that you're already doing, and we will help you and your clients reach your goals faster than ever before. Or if you want to go the next level, and you like these concepts, and you're wondering, well, how does this apply to higher intensity activities in the gym, or you're post-rehab, and you're like, I'm good at this stuff, but I'd like to get back into the gym. Well, guess who can help you with that? Big Z can. He can write a program for you, yes, online training, where I will do a movement consultation. I'll take that information and design a program specifically tailored both to your movement and fitness needs. And then we will get you in business and faster to your goals. Once you've scoured zachcouples.com, please subscribe to me on iTunes and Stitcher at The Zach Couples Show. Leave a review while you're there so we can help the fam grow. I'm also on social media, Facebook/ZCouples. The Twitter handle is @ZCouples. The Instagram, baby, is Zach, Z-A-C, Couples, C-U-P-P-L-E-S. And if you go to YouTube, search Zach Couples. I got a gang of exercises there that I'm playing with and I use on my clients. So like everything that's on that page, I've done with someone and it's worked. So you probably want to check that out. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving. And I'll see you next time. Deuces.